From thick to thin, from smashed to steamed, even though there are thousands of great YouTube videos about burgers, I still feel like we're missing something. That something we are missing is understanding the fundamentals of making the perfect burger at home. Now, this is not some recipe video touting a burger recipe I have as the perfect one. Instead, my goal in this video is to put us on the pathway to the perfect burger. So how do we do that? Well, I think it starts with basic food science. In this video, I'm going to run through 5 different experiments and a couple of taste tests to explain the fundamentals of why and how to make the burgers that we love so much. For example, what does fattest flavor actually mean? How do I achieve beef flavor nirvana? Why is burger juice lubrication important? Why do we like crispy burgers? Does it matter which ground beef I use and what kind of a difference does it make in how it browns? Or can I make a chicken burger taste beefier than one made with actual ground beef? For a dish that's so simple at the surface, I have so many questions, and making this video helped me have a ton of breakthroughs. I've chosen to focus on the big picture fundamentals that are most relevant to us as home cooks, and these should be able to apply to any potential burger preparation and set us on that pathway to the perfect burger. And if you like this video, I can do a follow-up because there are some topics I wasn't able to hit on in this one, like salt, the toppings, and assembly, because I spent so much time, energy, and experimentation on the core ingredient of burgers, and that is the ground beef. So with that being said, let's break it down. Here are the 3 ground beef mixes that we will use for the majority of the experiments. I have 93-7, 80-20, and 70-30. And Guga did a video where he tested out 3 high-fat burger mixes, including butter, that inspired this video, and that's great if you do have this stuff to grind your own, but I wanted to focus on these 3 mixes because I think most of us can find these ranges at a grocery store or the local butcher shop. Also, these blends are kind of evenly spaced across the spectrum, so it should allow us to see some clear differences in the experiments and also help explain the food science a little bit better. For example, right off the bat, you're probably seeing some differences in how these look raw, with specks of white interspersed with the reddish lean meat, and that amount of white beef fat sprinkled throughout is what makes the massive difference in the outcome of a burger. Now, before we shape or smash these, let's zoom out a bit and actually look at the 2 components that make up ground beef in the first place. Now, this should start to set off some light bulbs, not only in our burgers, but anything that you cook with beef. Ground meat is made up of 2 components, lean meat and fat. And when it comes to burgers, things like how the meat is ground will make a difference, but this video is already too long, so today we are focusing on the fat. As noted in Meathead, for ground beef, you want at least 20% fat, not 15%. And many top chefs now recommend 25 to 30% fat. So why does the ratio of lean meat to fat matter so much? Well, it really comes down to one thing: beef fat melts. This single property of beef fat, the fact that it melts, makes all the difference in our ground beef choices. And here's a simple experiment number 1 that lays the foundation for so many things in this video. I sliced off a section of flank steak and chopped it into a rough ground beef, and flank steak is super lean, so this is essentially 100% lean ground beef. Then I took pure beef fat and chopped that up as well. Now, instead of mixing them, I actually added 15 grams of each right to the griddle to let them cook. And I love little tests like this because they're super simple, but they get down to the core food science of it all. And in this, there are 3 very important observations. First is liquid release. Take a look at the fat and we can see that it starts to melt and pool at the base of the beef fat pile. It's liquid fat, it has melted. On the other hand, the lean meat is releasing liquid, but it's not fat, it's water. This water is pushed out of the meat proteins as they tighten, and then it steams at 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 C. So really we have fat versus water release, and guess how much weight these lost after being cooked? Again, both started at 15 grams, but the beef weighed 10 grams or 66% of its original weight, and the fat only weighed 3.5 grams or 23% of its original weight. So the water, most of that just steamed off and was lost in the air, but the fat didn't evaporate. It was actually just released out onto the pan. Now this liquid fat release has a profound difference in observation number 2, browning. When I flip these two over, just take a look at them. The fat, which melted into the pan, has essentially shallow fried itself, leading to all these crispy brown bits, whereas the lean meat just released that water to steam and it's looking pretty gray. Now we have a couple other tests around browning that we'll get to in a couple minutes, but the third observation from this is the beefy flavor. If you give these to a stiff, guess which one smells beefier? It's not the lean meat, it's actually the fat. And a lot of the flavor molecules that we identify as beefy flavor are actually concentrated in the beef fat, not the meat itself. And as you can maybe guess, these simple observations have a massive effect on two things: the flavor and the texture of the burger. Now for me and my cooking brain, this little test started flicking off light bulbs all over the place. And this test was done on complete opposite ends of the spectrum, 100% fat and 100% lean meat, but let's zoom back into what we are testing today, because these outcomes will ring true, but on much more of a sliding scale. For example, how much better is the flavor? How much better is the texture? And let's talk flavor first. Many of us have probably heard the phrase, fat is flavor, and that signature meaty, beefy goodness that we salivate over in a great burger is actually not just from the lean beef itself. A lot of it, as we just smelled, is actually from the beef fat. For example, the prize filet mignon, as I've shown on the channel, is super tender, yes, but it's also very lean. And as far as beefy flavor goes, it is extremely lacking when compared to a ribeye, which is due to the increased intra and intermuscular fat that a ribeye has. Now I've always wondered, how strong is the beef flavor in beef fat? For example, could I add beef fat to ground chicken and would it taste beefier than a lean beef burger? Well, that's exactly what we put to the test. I took 170 grams or 6 ounces of 93.7 ground beef and shaped it into a patty. Then I took 135 grams of chopped up ground chicken breast and mixed it with 35 grams of beef fat that I chopped up to form a Franken 80% chicken and 20% beef fat mixed. Then I formed that into a patty and cooked both of them. And as I was cooking them, I noticed those same effects from the first test, where the fat melts and it actually gives us a pretty killer crust. I mean, that is the best looking chicken burger I've ever made. For assembly, I kept the toppings pretty simple with burger sauce, 3 pickles, shredded lettuce, onions, and then I did add some cheese to the burger over the top. Now, instead of testing myself to try to avoid some biases that I may have, I actually asked my blindfolded brother to taste them first. All right, everybody, we have a blind taste test contestant, my brother. I'm gonna feed him both of the burgers and then just ask him 2 questions. Here's burger number 1. Fully digest, we'll get you a palate cleanser too. Okay, the palate has been cleansed, time for burger number 2. Bite. Question number 1, which burger was juicier?
I'd say the second one.
And then second question is, which one tasted beefier?
First one, but the first one was drier, which was strange. First one tasted drier, not as juicy, but it tasted better. This one didn't taste like much, to be honest, but It did taste juicier. None of them were like my ideal burger, to be honest. But the first one, better flavor, but drier overall. Second one, juicier, but I wasn't picking up a lot of beef flavor on that one. Yeah, it just doesn't have much flavor.
Yeah, definitely juicier though. I feel like this one didn't taste like much either.
It's juicier, but I don't know. This one tastes more beefy to me. I like this one better.
I thought the beef fat would make more of a difference. I mean, it makes it's way juicier, fattier. like that, but
it didn't really make it taste much any better.
So straight up, this was the opposite of what I thought was gonna happen. The chicken burger with the increased fat was way more juicy, it had a nicer crust, and was overall just better flavor-wise. And while it did have notes of beefy flavor, it was still pretty obvious that it was chicken. I mean, it is still 80% chicken breast at the end of the day. The beef burger, on the other hand, was really dry, and honestly, this is why I would not recommend this cooking method for 93.7 ground beef, but it still clearly tasted like beef. So not what I expected, but what did we learn? Well, beef fat is definitely important, but it's not the only variable that matters to achieve that beef flavor nirvana we want in a burger, and in fact, it's really a combination of three things. 1, the beef fat, 2, the lean beef flavor, and 3, the Maillard or browning reaction, which creates the exterior of the crust. Okay, so in general, more beef fat is going to mean more beef flavor, but there is gonna be a point where you kind of go too far. For example, I've definitely had some greasy burgers that, yeah, they were enjoyable in the moment, but then they kind of sit down like a brick in your stomach, which is not so enjoyable after. And with that being said, we have flavor covered. But now let's talk about what fat does for texture, which is just, if not more important. Specifically, the two most important textural qualities for a burger, in my opinion, are number 1, juiciness, and 2, crust formation. Now, for these qualities, I wanted to test out 2 different burger style preparations. Number 1, a large pub style burger, single patty, and secondly, the king of the crust, the smash burger. And to help with crust formation, because I know a bunch of you will probably ask me where I got it from, check out the griddle press set from today's sponsor, Made In. Made In has been innovating, and this is the pre-seasoned carbon steel griddle that is used all throughout this video. And as a lover of griddles, this is basically how I would have designed this thing. This griddle withstands heat up to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit and is perfect for cooking on the stove inside, but can also be used on the grill outside or even an open flame. Used inside, it's perfect for just keeping it on the stove, and it will easily become one of your favorite and most used pans. And I didn't even get to the best part. It actually comes as a set with this heavy duty griddle press, which can be used to increase contact points for increased browning of whatever you happen to be cooking. So if you want to get the griddle and press set or any of Made In's amazing cookware, head to the link below to get 15% off your order using code Ethan, and you'll be seeing this thing in many of my videos going forward. We'll get to smashing in a second, but first let's define what the juices are and why we love them so much. The juices that drip from a burger are made up of 2 things, which you can probably guess from the first test we did. Number 1, it's the fat that is melted from the ground beef, and number 2, it's the water that was released from the lean meat as it's cooked, again, because those proteins in the meat tighten up, pushing out the water. Now, our goal when cooking burgers is to retain as much of these juices as possible, and this really comes down to 2 things. Don't overcook your burger. The more it cooks, the more water releases, and also the more fat melts. Now, to combat that, secondly, you can just add more fat to your burger mix. So let's put our ground beef mixes to the test, and first up we have what I'm calling the lubrication test. Lubrication is why the burger juices typically increase our pleasure in the first place. I'll explain why in a second, but let's do the experiment first. For this one, I shaped 150 gram patties from each ground beef mix, the 93.7, the 80-20, and the 70-30. Then I cooked each one on the griddle to roughly 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 C, or medium-ish. I weighed each burger after it came off the griddle, and then to kind of simulate picking up a burger and eating it, I took 2 deli containers as my bun and squeezed those burgers to allow all the juices to fall onto the plate, and then I also weighed the juices released. Now, conveniently, this ended up being a sliding scale, which is kind of what I would expect. The 93.7 retained the most weight, but released the least amount of juice when squeezed, and vice versa for the highest fat. So why is this test important? Well, like I said, lubrication. And the best way that I could think of to communicate the importance of burger juices is actually by comparing it to a salad vinaigrette. So a vinaigrette is made with 3 parts fat, like olive oil, and 1 part liquid, like balsamic vinegar. And when added to a salad, it sticks to the exterior of the salad components, enhancing the mouthfeel and imparting flavor. Now, the beef juices in our burger are essentially the same thing. Instead of olive oil and vinegar, it's made with beef fat and then water liquid from the lean meat. So imagine this piece of burger that I squeeze all the juices out from is a piece of lettuce. You know, not great, but when I add some beef vinaigrette, if you will, it is light years better. Now, I've separated the components for the test, but when we bite into a burger, these juices are released into our mouth, where it essentially lubricates the tongue, and in terms of texture, it gives us this glossy, unctuous mouthfeel. Now, this sounds a little gross when you kind of break it down like that, but trust me, you and I love this feeling, and what's interesting about this test is the differences of the ratios in our beef vinaigrettes. Juices. For example, the 80/20 beef juice has much more fat compared to the 93/7 beef juice, which you can easily see that layer of beef in the 80/20 has already solidified. And like we mentioned earlier, for flavor, the fat of the burger is going to enhance and concentrate that beefy flavor, but it's also going to lubricate any toppings, sauces, or cheeses we have in there as well. Okay, so we got juiciness covered, but now let's talk about my favorite quality of a burger, and one that I think can turn an average burger into a really, really good one, and that is the crust. Here's a quick experiment. Take a look at these 2 burger patties and tell me which one you want to take a bite out of. Pretty obvious choice for me. Now, these burgers were made with identical 80/20 ground beef. One of them was made in a pan on the stove, and the other I poached in water. Since water can't get above 212 degrees Fahrenheit, that burger is never going to brown on the exterior. Why? Because the Maillard reaction doesn't start to happen at temperatures until it's above 300 degrees Fahrenheit. The burger I cooked in the pan, on the other hand, was able to achieve that with no problem because of guess what property we learned from earlier? Beef fat melts. We're coming full circle now. I didn't add any extra fat to the pan. Instead, I just got it ripping hot and added the patty. The beef fat melted down into the pan and created a layer of thermal conductivity that was able to achieve the requisite browning temperature and give me a nice crust. Now with this test, we are again on 2 broad ends of the spectrum to kind of prove a point. But what I'm really interested to see in is what does the crust look like when you kind of step up in the fat mixes. So that's what we're gonna do next in experiment number 5, the crust formation test. For this test, I decided to do smash burgers instead of the single patty pub style burgers. And I took 85-gram balls from each of the ground beef mixes and then mashed them onto a ripping hot griddle with the press. I let the crust form for about 60 seconds before scraping and giving them a flip, and here are each of them. The biggest jump, in my opinion, is between the 93/7 to the 80/20. We get some clear differences in crust formation, and when you take a bite, you can definitely feel that extra textural contrast in your mouth. Now, the differences we've seen in these experiments have been pretty narrowly focused, and it makes sense that they kind of followed the trends they did. But to wrap the video up, I wanted to do one final taste test with a full burger, and honestly, this one did not go like I thought it would. For the final taste test, I made 3 identically sized double smash burgers with our 3 ground beef mixes. And for these, again, I kept the toppings pretty plain, which is what I'd normally do. I have a bun, burger sauce, thinly sliced lettuce, then some thinly sliced red onion, and lastly, of course, I made the smash burgers with cheese. So let's see how these taste. One final taste test. We have the 93/7, the 80/20, and then the 70/30. So what should we start with first?
Let's go least fat
first,
I think. Oh yeah. This is a good burger.
It's pretty solid.
Yeah.
80/20. We'll save our thoughts for the end once we compare and contrast a little bit more. It's good too. I love burgers. All right, last one. Big step up on the crust on that one.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, I'm gonna finish it. So that was pretty interesting. And not exactly what I thought. I think the biggest step up was honestly to the 3070.
I agree.
I don't know about you. The crust was way more crispy and noticeably more of the beefy flavor. And again,
big time.
Increased fat, way better browning. You could hear and feel the crisp in there.
Exactly.
And then honestly, not
as much of a difference as I would think.
Yeah, I would have thought way more different between these two, which is pretty shocking to me.
When you're putting it in a full burger, you know, cheese, sauce, lettuce, tomato, I mean, it's not much of a difference.
Yeah, I think once you add the sauce, once you add the cheese, especially in between the layers, like when I was going through the tests and we went through them with like single burger patties, you can really see massive differences. But once it actually is in a full burger, not nearly as much as I thought. That being said, I think the biggest step up
was the last
was
one,
the 7030.
Noticeably better.
If you are going for a 93.7, kind of a little bit healthier, make sure you can add sauces, add cheeses to it, especially between the two patties. Makes a massive difference because when it was a single patty, we had tested yesterday, like not great at all.
Great, yeah.
Super dry, but once you can kind of add those textural components that give you some juiciness, it becomes a much better burger. So in conclusion, here's a little scorecard with some of the bigger takeaways I have with each ground beef mix. There's no doubt that the higher ground beef had noticeable benefits in flavor and crust formation in the test, but I found that 80-20% to be perfectly acceptable as well. Also, if your perfect burger is one that can help you watch the waistline a bit, using that 93.7 beef and the smash burger technique is definitely the way to go. So I hope the observations and basic food science that we learned in this video will help you make better burgers in the future. So subscribe if you are new and enjoy the video, comment your favorite burger toppings down below, and let me know. I can do some follow-ups on more burger theory and burger science videos if you guys want to. But it's gonna wrap it up for me in this one. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace, y'all.